100.9's Indy Connection with Emily Metheny.
Hello, I'm Emily Metheny, your host. This week, I had the chance to catch up with David Berman, Vice President of Harm Reduction and Crisis Stabilization Services for Mental Health America of Indiana. So to start, David, can you tell me a little bit about what we've been seeing this past year and how it's kind of leading into this holiday season?
So the past year has been really interesting. Obviously, we are coming off of a year in 2020 where we really saw the brunt of the pandemic. There was lots of concern, lots of anxiety. A lot of it was unknowns. And going into 21, I think everybody was very optimistic that we had a vaccine and there was light at the end of the tunnel. And obviously now we're seeing a lot of variations of the COVID strains. And so there's a lot of fear and anxiety that is reemerging. But it also feels like we've gotten to a point in the last several months where people have really hit the wall, where enough is enough. In all sectors, I'm hearing, just from friends, family, and it doesn't matter what their workplace is as far as the, occupationally. It could be banking, it could be advertising, it could be mental health, it could be, media and radio and television. People have just kind of had it and they are exhausted physically, mentally. And that light that they saw at the end of the tunnel is getting murkier and murkier. And now we're getting into the holidays where we see the typical issues with, escalation of depression, anxiety, and we're getting into those cold, cloudy days. Granted, it's 60 degrees today or going to be, but it's still overcast. And, we talk about seasonal affective disorder. And so we're just like with last year, we're dealing with the normal holiday blues, the normal seasonal changes that affect our mood, that exacerbate existing mental health conditions or creating new issues, added with the same old stuff that we saw last year that's pandemic related, including the economy. We're going into Christmas. I've heard lots of stories from lots of people, looking at all of those cargo ships that are sitting out there that we see the news stories on that can't get the things that they wanted to get for their families for Christmas. And so you've got a little bit of an economic rebound, but there's a shortage across the board. Gas prices are going up. The grocery store, every single time you go, it's a little bit more and it all adds up. And so I think people are in a place right now, given the set of circumstances, where going into the holidays or not, it is really affecting folks in a negative way, probably as badly as we saw last year.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned some of the strains that we're seeing this year economically. What can people do if they aren't able to control the prices? What can they do to kind of take care of themselves and not try to rein in that stress?
So, there are lots of gifs and memes online about the things that you can control and the things that you can't control and what we focus on. My favorite is kind of the concept of there are things that we can control and there are things that matter. And the intersection of the two is really what we need to focus on. The things that don't matter, who cares? And the things that we can't control, there's not a lot that we can do. And so, yes, you're absolutely right. We can't control the prices and we can't control the variants of COVID, but we can control how we feel, how we react, our attitude. And so I think it's a combination really of two things. One being self-care, and that goes across the board from one end of the spectrum to the other, from making sure that we have enough sleep to doing things that we enjoy and everything in between, as well as the fact that we need to be cognizant of that, what we can control and what we can't control sort of perspective. And really most of the time when we look at anxiety and stress overall, it is us anticipating the worst possible outcome of a scenario that 98% of the time doesn't happen at all. And so I think a lot of it is about being intentional, and looking at things for what they are, as opposed to what we anticipate that worst possible outcome being. But going back to that self-care, again, I think intentionality comes into play as well, being intentional about the things that we do. You and I were talking earlier about having boundaries and saying, no, this is my time. No, this is dinner time. This is lunchtime. No, this is break time. No, I'm going to take time for myself, and I'm happy to work with you tomorrow. But, today it's 6 o'clock and I'm done for the day. And ensuring that you enforce those boundaries for yourself, because if we are not structuring our lives and being accountable to ourselves, other folks are not going to respect those boundaries that we attempt to put in place.
Mm-hmm. And how can we start really enforcing our own boundaries if that's something that we've never had to do before?
Well, that's a great question, because I do a really bad job of that myself. I think it's just, again, it's the intentionality. It is recognizing that there are very few things that absolutely have to be done today that can't wait till tomorrow. The Microsoft, and I forget what it's called, the Trends feature now with Office, where I go to send an email at 8:30 at night, and it gives me a little alert that says, oh, you might want to wait until tomorrow. And I just, get mad at it and turn it off. I mean, there's all these tools in place that are sort of forcing our accountability. And I think anything from putting it on our calendars where, hey, just like we have a meeting, we show up, you schedule that break, or you schedule that absolute, I am done for the day boundary time, and stick to it. I know folks that have their office space, whether it's an actual office, working from home, or a corner of a room, or a place in the room that is designated as office space. And when it's not work time, they don't even step into that area or that room. They just don't do it. And it's I guess, a discipline thing in some sense. It's an intentionality thing, and it's respecting ourselves and our body's needs, our mind's needs, and understanding that everything doesn't have to be done today. Absolutely, things come up, and we need to focus on them in the moment, and that's life. But there are many things that we do because it's just 5 minutes. It'll only take me 5 minutes. But for me anyway, I feel like 5 minutes turns into an hour, and now I've lost an hour of my time. And so there's no easy answer to how do we make sure that happens. It's really accountability to ourselves and maybe others, maybe our family members, making sure that we're accountable, and that they force us to have those stop and start times.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that has started to shift where we're starting to make those boundaries more apparent because of the pandemic, because we have shifted to being more remote or hybrid? Do you think that's going to change?
I hope so. I think that, there's so many things that are positive, I guess, that are going to come out of the pandemic, including our perspective on things. And I think the way that we've operated remotely for 21 months, and we're still, as far as Mental Health America of Indiana, pretty much operating remotely. And we've proven that we can do so and be productive. There's nothing in my office, nothing at all in my office that I need to do my job. I brought everything home, and it's an expensive storage unit, and there's nothing that I need there. So from that perspective, we've sort of shifted the culture. We've realized, hey, you can be productive working remotely. And oh, by the way, there's also opportunities for cost savings because we need less office space, we need less supplies, et cetera. In that same way, I think that the shift in the culture of what a productive workday means and how we measure success has shifted as well. So if you look at other countries where they embrace the siesta, or they embrace the 4-day work week, or they embrace take more breaks, what you find is that the productivity level goes up. So you could be, so for example, if I have a project that's due tomorrow, I am working on it, 10 o'clock at night, and I'm working on the same thing over and over and over again. And, the same paragraph, I'm writing the same slide on a PowerPoint presentation. And an hour later, I'm still there and I'm not making any progress, as opposed to giving it up, coming back fresh tomorrow morning, and it takes me 15 minutes to do it. And so you look at that stop time and that start time, and you look at the productivity. When you're putting more breaks in, you're actually working less time, yes, but you're being more productive. And so when you look at things from that economic standpoint, and we're talking, here work, so we're talking business, and what it always boils down to is money. That extra time that we are taking for ourselves equals or surpasses ultimately the productivity that we would have if we were working through it. And, that's the side effect. The most important factor being we need it for our mental health. We absolutely need it. It is something that is essential to our wellness. And I guess not just mental wellness, but physical wellness. If I don't get enough sleep, I find that I get colds and sick more regularly. So, our mental wellness is our physical wellness. Our physical wellness is our mental wellness. So if we're taking care of our minds, it reflects the way that our bodies operate, which reflects the amount of sick time or downtime that we may have when it comes to work. And so I feel like because we were forced into this position, kind of looking at it from that necessity is the mother of invention, we were forced in here, and lo and behold, here we've realized that, hey, we can change the whole culture of the workplace and have more productivity, have more of a net economic gain than when we did it the old way. 10 hours of work, when it's, when you look at it from a productivity standpoint, really could be the same as 6 hours of work. And so, yeah, I think we're in a place that the culture has shifted, and the corporate world, the business world, from an economic standpoint, we realized that, hey, we can do it this way. And I would hope that continues in perpetuity.
And if someone wants to start this conversation in their workplace, how can they do that with some confidence?
So there's been a big push over the last several years, but especially in the last, I would say 2 years or so, that the Indiana Chamber of Commerce, through their wellness coalition, has really focused on what wellness means in the workplace, both from the substance use side as well as the mental health side. I've done a lot of webinars for them on stress management and resilience for many of their member corporations and businesses. The bottom line being, from a traditional business development economic standpoint, the central organization in the state of Indiana has really recognized and is pushing this whole concept. And so, to answer your question from a comfort level, well, if the business development experts are saying, here in Indiana, that this is the route to go, that adds some credibility, I think, to the, Joe Smith individual who works for a company that says, hey, I think maybe this would be beneficial as far as, consider changing the workplace culture to XYZ. Well, it's not just an idea that he has, and it's not just something that he read on the internet or that is being done in California or somewhere else. This is a concept that's being pushed and embraced and recognized as best practice right here in Indiana by our workforce development, our economic development experts.
Excellent, excellent. So kind of shifting gears, as we're starting the new year, 2022, it's kind of looking like 2021. We have vaccines, we have information, we have a new strain. I feel like I'm repeating, we didn't start the fire.
Repeat. Right. Yep.
What can people do to kind of get ahead and really start thinking about mental health and not making a New Year's resolution, but kind of just putting their health more to the forefront?
Well, it almost is like making a New Year's resolution. I mean, the most common New Year's resolution is exercise, and people, it always makes me laugh when you look at holiday sales of exercise equipment, and it's based on that commitment, that resolution that I am going to do X, Y, and Z, and then the treadmills that people buy a month later become just expensive clothes, like closets, clothes bars that they hang their clothes and throw stuff on. It really is like a resolution. It is a commitment to ourselves. It's a commitment to our families. And we were just talking about the workplace. It's a commitment to the workplace as well, that we are going to take care of ourselves so that we are the very best us that we can be for that workplace, for our friends and family, most importantly for us. And so, we're making a commitment, and you need to do whatever you need to do to remind yourself of that, whether it be put it down in your schedule, whether it be put your running shoes in a place that you have to look at it every morning that reminds you, I'm going to do that. It's shifting the way that we think. It's shifting our routines. It's being intentional about the things that we do. There are at least 10,000 apps probably out there between iOS and Android that are that type, that are mindfulness apps, that are physical wellness apps, that are health oriented. The step tracker, I think, was the most interesting invention over the last several years that has really embodied this idea of kind of the culture shift. I know folks that would get into bed and they're 100 steps short of that 10,000 goal, and they'll walk up and down the hall because that's important. And so kind of that gamifying perspective where we're accountable to ourselves because we want to see that star pop up, or we're accountable to our friends, or we're putting it all out there, whatever it takes to remind you, to motivate you, to encourage you to take care of yourself. And that's all very subjective. It's different for everybody, but make sure every single day at a minimum, you're doing at least one thing to take care of yourself. And sometimes that involves nothing more than looking at things in a different light, kind of that glass half empty, glass half full. I'll give you an example. So you take an individual that, their routine is they get up in the morning and they make a cup of coffee, put the leash on the dog, and they take the dog for a walk. And it's like, why are you doing that? Well, I always drink coffee every morning and the dog has to go to the bathroom. So I just kind of do it. It's part of the routine, not realizing that, hey, this is me time. I enjoy taking the dog out for a walk. While I'm doing that, I'm either getting my head in a place where I'm getting ready for the day, or not thinking about anything and just kind of doing what I'm doing. And I love that great first cup of coffee. And all of a sudden, that change in perspective, that intentionality of understanding why you're doing something and what it means to you, can make something that you were already doing, that was already habitual, already part of your routine, be more meaningful. And so, looking at it from kind of the bigger picture, the American Psychiatric Association has this concept of name it to tame it, which basically boils down to very, very simplistic concept of, if you don't know what's going on with you, how can you fix it? If you don't know what you're feeling, if you can't identify whatever it is, and it could be physical health as well, if you're going to a doctor for something and you can't describe the symptoms, there's nothing that doctor is going to be able to do. If we can't identify what makes us happy, if we can't identify the things that trigger our moods, if we can't identify the things that we're doing that are meaningful, or the things that we need to stop doing because they're added stress, we can't really do anything about it. So, I love the concept of figuring out what is meaningful to you, figuring out what those things are that are stressful. Again, that intersection of what we have control over and what matters, as well as doing one thing every day, at least one thing that means something to you. It could be grabbing a cookie out of the cookie jar. It could be going for a run. It could be, watching, getting on TikTok and watching a bunch of short videos, whatever that may be. Do something that's important to you every single day.
That was going to be my next question. How many things do we need to set to do for self-care? Is one thing a day. Just choose one thing, start there.
How many? Well, sure, exactly. I mean, and it's like anything else. Exercising, we want you to take 50 steps a day, and that's all you need to do. You start, and then tomorrow you're going to take 52. And then so maybe you're starting with one thing and something that's super easy that's going to take you no more than a couple of minutes. And I don't care what that is. Petting the dog and walking outside, anything, start with something. What's enough? There is no answer to that. If you can do as many things to take care of yourself as you want. The other piece of the puzzle is doing things to support our family and friends. I mean, kind of that old adage that we're in the holiday season, giving is better than receiving. It feels good to give. It is biological. It triggers, our brain chemistry. It triggers everything from, hormones and endorphins to make us feel better. And it puts us in a better mood giving. It's biological. And so in doing something for someone else, really we're doing something for ourselves as well, because we feel good after doing it. So it's kind of killing two birds with one stone. We do something for our family, our spouse, our friends, they're appreciative, and we get something out of it as well. So, I would encourage, if you're talking a place to start, do one thing every day for yourself. Do one thing every day to support somebody else. Could be a neighbor, could be, a spouse, a child, a friend, another family member. And there's super simple things that we can do. Everything from, putting a note in your kid's lunchbox to, picking up the phone and sending somebody a text you haven't talked to in a while. Just, I'm thinking about you. I hope you have a great day. I mean, there's super simple things, but every little thing that we do, again, whether it's for ourselves or someone else, will ultimately make a difference. They add up, and at the end of the week, you do, and we could just be talking about the work week, Monday through Friday. You do one thing for yourself and one thing for everybody, for someone else. It's going to be a heck of a lot better week for you. I can guarantee it.
Excellent. And David, as we start to wrap up, can you share some resources if someone is struggling this holiday season during the start of the new year, where they can get help?
Sure, absolutely. So there are a ton of different resources out there. One of them that I love that we have right here in our backyard is the Be Well Crisis Helpline. And that can be accessed by just dialing 211. You'll follow the prompts, and literally within about 15 seconds, you can be talking to a trained crisis specialist 24/7, completely confidential. And just an amazing group of folks that are there night and day for any reason at all, whether it's just that you're feeling down in the moment or where you may actually be thinking about suicide. Great resource. Again, just dial 211, the Be Well Crisis Helpline. We've got the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. And I want to just kind of mention, as we're looking at the transition of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline into the 988 program, just basically changing the number. And that's a whole different conversation we could have. I just want to remind people that just because it's called the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline does not mean that it's only suicide related. Just like with Be Well, people can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline just because they are feeling anxious in the moment, or just because they've had a bad day and they need to talk to somebody. So, I recommend calling them. I recommend calling Be Well. There are a tremendous number of apps, whether there are computer-based apps or phone-based apps, that are wellness oriented. There are all sorts of mood trackers. There is the National Crisis Text Line, which is 741-741. Again, totally anonymous, 24/7. You could literally text any word. We like to say here in Indiana, if you will text IN for the Indiana abbreviation, we can actually track and do some predictive modeling as far as the volume of calls that comes out of Indiana. But you could put in the word banana or chair, and someone will respond to you. So all three of those, again, Be Well, National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, the crisis text line, are 24/7, completely anonymous, completely confidential, and will have someone that is well trained on the other end to just talk to you and help you navigate what it is that you're going through in the moment, as well as provide additional resources. And then the last thing I want to mention as far as resources go, Mental Health America National has a series of online self-screening tools, which are recognized as the best evidence-based, most widely used self-screening tools in the country. And you can, if you just Google Mental Health America self-screening, it'll be the first thing that pops up on Google. But what it allows you to do is take a look at what it is you may be feeling, and they will point you in the right direction of a self-screening you can take. And I believe there's 9 of them, everything from depression and anxiety to postpartum depression to PTSD, where you can do a self-screening, see where you fall, get some next steps, everything from, hey, this is screening that I have symptoms maybe related to bipolar disorder, and I'm 16 years old. How do I tell mom and dad? What kind of stigma am I going to be looking at? So those type of resources, all the way to, the end all be all. Here I live in this community. What's out there for me? Whether it be therapeutic in nature, whether it be, chats or online resources, whatever it may be. So if people are experiencing something that doesn't feel right and they can't necessarily identify that, I would recommend that they go ahead, get on there, do a self-screening. Maybe that'll give them a little bit more of an objective analysis of what it is that is going on with them, and then kind of act accordingly from there. So lots of things you can do to help identify, lots of things that you can do self-care oriented, lots of things that you can do that is treatment in nature, and maybe treatment isn't the best word, self-treatment, as far as apps and mindfulness, all the way to some sort of crisis intervention service if you get to a place that you really need that additional help. So lots of things out there for folks.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David.
Oh, you're very welcome.
For a list of resources that David mentioned during the interview, you can go to RadioNOWindy.com. Thank you for joining me this week, and please join me again next week. Until then, have a great week.
Radio Now 100.9's Indy Connection with Emily Metheny.